I'd like to thank Kyone first for having me here and getting an opportunity to tell the story to a room of complete strangers. You're not going to forget it. 2008, I was on tour in my band in New Orleans. We got into the city early and had some extra time to kind of hang around and wander through. It's one of the few places I had never got to go to before, and I always wanted to go there. At one point, I ended up in a touristy voodoo shop in the French Quarter, and I got into an argument with my bass player. He bought me a gift, and it was a Mardi Gras necklace with a big plastic penis. And I didn't appreciate the fact that he snuck up behind me and kind of hit me in the side of the face with it. We got into a bit of an argument. I took it and I threw it on the ground. I didn't want anything to do with it, and we fought back and forth for a few minutes. And I picked it up, and I put it in my pocket, and it stayed in there for the rest of the day. Fast forward to about 9 o'clock, we arrive at the club, and I'm setting up my drum set. I had my bass drum down, and I had my drum stool down with the top off of the drum stool. I was getting ready, I picked up all my gear, and I walked behind my drum set, and I lost my balance. And I fell on the drum stool without the top of the stool on. I fell in a way where it went through the bottom, this is going to get a little rough. It went through the bottom of my testicles and out through the front. In one fell swoop, I fell back. I landed on the ground, and instantly everything was numb in this area. So I kind of reach around and I feel a hole in my shorts. So I fell and I put my hand on my shorts and I felt a hole. I felt a hole in my underwear. And I felt blood. I pulled my hand out and I saw blood. I put my hand back in there and I actually felt the hole. And I kind of looked down. I looked down and I saw my insidey parts. We'll leave it at that. So I've seen enough TV to know that you put pressure on wounds. I grabbed him, I grabbed myself, and I ran out the back door. I saw one of my bandmates and I was like, hey, can you call 911? I need to go to the emergency room right now. He's like, what happened? I fell and I ripped my balls in half. So thankfully, he got right on the phone and called the ambulance. Now, the other band member comes out, and he asked me what happens, and I explained to him, and he didn't believe me until I pulled my hand out and I showed him the blood, and he literally passed out standing up and fell into the gutter, which was pretty funny. It was pretty funny at the time. So I was standing waiting, for the ambulance to come. Finally, it shows up. The EMT gets out, and he said, who called for the ambulance? And I said, that's for me. And he asked me what happened, and I explained to him, and he had the look of just disbelief. For about 30 seconds, he stared at me, and he said, deadpan, so you want to go to the hospital. So that would be fantastic if we could do that. So they load me into the back of the ambulance, and he's giving me IV fluids and everything. And he's like, I need to see the wound. So I had to take off what was left of my shorts. I took off that, and he looked at it and just stared for a minute, and then very quietly leaned back towards the driver and said, you gotta take a look at this. So the driver leans forward and looks. She turns around, leans forward and looks, and then immediately turns the ambulance on and hits the sirens, and off we go to the hospital. So I arrive at the ER. They unload me, bring me in, and they bring me into the room directly across from the main entrance of the hospital, or the emergency room. And the ER doctor comes in, and he takes a look at everything. And they gave me not a bedpan, but the little, the bottle to pee in to make sure I could still pee, and left me there basically with no shorts on, completely exposed, covered in blood, with a jar of my own pee directly across from the door, and he was nice enough to leave the curtains open. So everybody walking by was going like this, and then they're turning white and running away. After about 45 minutes, he comes back, and he's got his instruments to suture me, and he gave me about 14 or 15 shots of lidocaine into the actual scrotum, and for those of us that have them, you know that it's very thin, and it doesn't take anesthetic very well. So after that, he waited a little while longer, and he began to suture the wound. Now I should say that the kind of touring that we were doing was very do-it-yourself. We weren't making a lot of money. And I hadn't showered in about 5 days. We were in the deep south in August. Now, whatever that doctor had been through for the rest of that day, he was in an area of fog that was intolerable for me laying back on the gurney. So I give him a lot of props for keeping it together. At one point, I was shaking and I had my hands on the side, kind of trying to endure 20 stitches, that I could feel each one, everything. I apologized for being so jumpy, and he looked at me dead in the face and said, "Don't worry about it. Whatever you have to do to get through this is absolutely fine." So I get through the sutures and everything. It took I was there for about 3 hours. At the very end, the awesome orderly gave me a tiny gauze pad about the size of the palm of my hand for this giant wound, and now it's about the size of a softball, the angriest, purplest softball you've ever had to deal with. So all I was able to do was just put the bandage on and pull my shorts up and be ushered off to the hospital, or to the hotel that we had gotten for the night. Now, I was laboring under the delusion, because I'm an idiot, that we were going to be able to finish the last 5 shows of the tour. The doctor corrected me and told me basically that if I tried to do that, or I tried to go home in the van and the 40-hour drive in the heat of August, that I was going to probably get a very bad infection and stood a very good chance of having some serious problems. So, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm a poor drummer, I'm in New Orleans, I call my parents. I'm like, I call my girlfriend first, and I tell her what happened, and I'm flying home, so she can pick me up. Then I had to call my parents and ask for them to give me money for a plane ticket. Unfortunately, my parents are elderly; they don't have a credit card, so I had to call my brother and wake him up in the middle of the night and have him buy me a ticket. And I was able to fly home from New Orleans to Charlotte with a nice 2.5-hour layover, doped up on as much Percocet as I could possibly handle. I made it home safely, and at the time, 3 of the people in the band all worked at the same place at Whole Foods in Glastonbury. And they all came back to work early, and nobody said a word about what happened. I basically disappeared. I was out of work for 4 months. I wasn't able to play drums for almost a year. I had severe, just agonizing pain for the first 6 months. For those of us that have balls, you know that when you get hit in them, instantly you have just agonizing, all-encompassing pain right here. That's what I had for about 8 months. And the worst part of all of this was Percocet tends to affect my stomach and makes me have to go to the bathroom a lot, which isn't normally a big deal unless you have a scrotum the size of a softball. You have to get that down into where everything is. So it was a very it was a very interesting experience, and I'd like to say that I took something constructive from it, but I really have not. Thank you very much. Thank you.